Hi, welcome to the Business Forum. I am Nalinee Khemraj. With me today is economist Kavena Ramsoobhag. Welcome, Kavena.
Thank you, Nalinee.
Today we will be discussing the performance of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago for 2012. I see, Kavena, recently there was a publication in one of the newspapers that the IMF projected growth in our local economy for 2012. Do you think, given all that has been happening recently with the economy, this is something that we'll be seeing in 2012?
Well, I had a chance to go through the IMF statement, and they projected that economic growth should increase by 1.7% or thereabouts for 2012. They basically based it on private sector, recent gains in momentum in private sector credit, the planned or the CLICO restructuring by the government, the increased government expenditure, their plans that they set out in the budget statement, and if I'm not mistaken, they also looked at increases in outputs in the energy sector. All of that culminated in their projection of
1.7% increase in growth.
Yeah. And also the central bank, I think at the beginning of this month or maybe last month came out with their publication of their economic bulletin. And they projected that in 2011 the economy declined by 1.4%. This was not what was projected from before. 2010 we had little or no growth at all.
Right.
2011 we had a contraction, and we're moving forward with the expectation of an increase in economic activity in 2012. Right. What was indicated was commercial bank credit to the private sector increased by some 5.3% year on year. What was interesting was the increase in their credit to businesses. I believe it went up by about 6 point something percent, which augurs well for the economy going forward. It signals that real activity in the economy will or should be picking up this year, which of course will translate into the creation of more jobs, more income, more expenditure. Or at least we hope that is what will take place. Consumer credits also continue to increase with an increase in real estate mortgages by some 9 point something percent.
That's a big jump.
That is year on year. That is a big jump. But real estate lending has been on a steady increase over the past year. So I suppose that augurs well for our standard of living, right? More of our citizens are supposed to be,
I've always had high regard for economists. I think they have, the answers to everything. And one of the interesting things about economists from my Form 6 days is that they could always look at a part of the economy, or as they say, theorize and say, all things being equal, this will happen or that will happen. Now, two interesting statements. First of all, we open saying that the IMF projected growth in the economy in 2012, and then you spoke about the central bank's economic bulletin, the first one for this year, was it, or was it coming from 2011 into 2012?
For December.
Right, saying that last year there was a projection. It may have been smaller projection for growth in the economy last year, but there was actually a contraction. And looking at all the factors that led to the IMF's conclusion that we will be seeing some 1.7% growth in 2012. One of the things you mentioned that jumped out at me is a 5.3% increase in commercial lending, is it?
Lending to private sector.
To private sector.
Yeah.
Could I say with the state of the economy, and especially with construction being a major player in our economy, it's something that the government uses as a catalyst to to stimulate growth, and also something that shows that the economy is doing well, because when as the other economists say, when the offshore economy is doing well, the onshore economy is also doing well, and construction ties in nicely to that. With this fairly big increase in in lending to commercial customers, would you say that is something that is going to continue in the long term? Could it be that because the economy has been stagnant for the last, I would say, 1 to 2 years or 2 to 3 years, that businesses are struggling to keep up with their commitments, and they have had to increase borrowing to finance that? Could we say, all things being equal, this is something that we could suppose, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Would you be willing to give an opinion on that?
Well, I think businesses were more or less hesitant with the way the international economy was going, local economy, the stagnation in local economy. They more or less were hesitant in expansion and taking on extra credit when they are not too sure if they'll be able to meet their obligations.
Right, because I think I remember, not to interrupt you, that some time ago commercial banks were saying to the government also that we are not seeing any increase in our activity, people are not borrowing, so it wasn't saying anything good for commercial banks also. So now we're seeing an actual increase. So let's hope, as you say, that all of this augurs really well for the economy in 2012, whatever the reason.
From what I saw in the reports, the retail sales index actually rose year on year. They're about 7%, or 6% or 7%, or somewhere around there. And that says that our consumers are spending.
Okay, then I was just about that.
So it should propel and support consumer credit, not consumer credit, business credit and sales and profitability and so on.
Everything that leads to the whole cycle with the national economy. Okay, could we just look a little bit at all of the factors that the IMF said would lead to this projected 1.7% increase in growth in the national economy, and probably just chat about them a little bit, on each one?
Sure. Well, one of the things that they mentioned was the increase in commercial and private sector lending.
Right.
Well, private sector lending is commercial lending also. One of the other factors that they looked at was government's investments, planned investments in their budget. The 2011-2012 budgets. Government has some really good plans in the budget, but of course it's a budget, and depending on
projected income that we might have,
and depending on the implementation of these projects, we could probably see that filtering into economic growth. They have looked at expanding the downstream industry under the energy sector. They went, from what I read, they currently have a project for calcium chloride.
That's the Carousel project.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a copy of some of the budget highlights here. Right, that's the start of construction of the Carousel plant to begin in 2012. That's an estimated cost of $430 million. That's a US $450 million project.
That's right, and that translates into jobs.
Right.
And in the construction sector.
Right. Although it's in the energy sector, it's an energy-based project. It comes back to the construction sector.
And, well, of course, output and exports for us. And if I'm not mistaken, it's that project that will lead to the plastics industry and stuff like that. So there's a lot of spin-off that we can gain from that project.
Right, from that one project.
And then they're also looking at the expansion of the solar solar energy.
Right. I think there are a lot of incentives.
Wind and solar. They have a project that's coming up.
I think they have incentives for people who want to invest in those kind of businesses.
Alternative energies.
Yes, alternative energy. Yes.
Alternative energies. And yes, they are looking at a national solar project and a national wind project. Barbados has a wind energy, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So I don't see why Trinidad can't have it. Of course, Barbados is more flat, but we can find a way to work things through.
And Trinidadians are very creative. I'm sure we can find a way to work things through.
That's right. And also, they have really looked at urban development. They have some projects out there at Invaders Bay.
That is also supposed to be private sector.
That's right. Driven, yeah. Housing, agriculture. They really do have a lot of things in the budget. Goodies. They have a lot of goodies, right? How well that will translate for the economy really depends on the implementation. Yeah.
It reminds me of a quote that I read somewhere through studying economics, somewhere year 1 UE, form 6. Somebody said that the IMF is the bearer of good plans and not the implementer. Could we say the same thing for the government? So it's really for the government to get it. So what you're saying basically is that the government has the plans. We've seen from their budget that they've allocated, different amounts of money for different
across the board, housing, health, education, everything.
But really, to get things started and to get the economy, kickstart once again is really how well they are able to implement all of this.
Yeah.
And then it ties back again to government, bureaucracy, state enterprises, central tenders board, all of that. So we could go on and that's a different story by itself. So we'll stay far from it.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was the incentives that government are putting forward for small to medium-term enterprises. They have come up with a plan, or they have charged the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange with the responsibility to come up with a junior market, which is really geared to small and medium-term enterprises being able to raise capital. One of the things that SMEs have complained about over the past couple of years was the high cost of commercial credits and the availability to them and those kinds of things. They have offered incentives to SMEs with a minimum capital of 5 million up to 25 shareholders, and I believe it's 30% holdings.
Okay, but how exactly will this look? So, because I'm only asking because I think the average person, myself included, I wouldn't know how, I'm not aware of what the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange does exactly. I would think that it's really for bigger companies. When you think the stock exchange, you think big conglomerates in Trinidad.
That's right.
So that's to understand. We need to be educated and we need to know what are the benefits, how it works, and then get that level of trust that this will actually work for us.
It really would. It allows SMEs to relatively less expensive ways of capital, raising capital, right? So once you meet the initial requirements, you register with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and then you list your company, you list shares on the stock exchange, and you have investors, will buy up your primary issue, and you go ahead.
So it's basically as a small company. If I have a small company with capital,
and you have to have a minimum of 25 shareholders.
25 shareholders. So I am coming to you with 25 shareholders and my $5 million, and then I put up. If I have 100 shares, ordinary shares issued, and I have 25, with the 25 persons that I have here, the other 75 could be for sale, and they would buy it at X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And that's where
I believe the 25% stake shareholders can hold no more than 30%.
No more than 30%.
And yeah.
So the other 70% of my company are more or less for sale.
More or less,
I get the equity that I need to do.
To expand, and with expansion comes exports, right, and those kinds of
all
things, new markets.
All
that's right.
Of expansion. Okay. Well, that is something that we could, if there's I think one of the things
that should be done, especially to drive this project through, is an education drive, right, by both the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, to really go out there, meet the SMEs, let them know what are the regulatory requirements.
Let them know this is an option.
Yes, that's right. Okay. That's right.
I think too that one of the things you had mentioned to me in the past is that you go out actively and you meet with schools and with students and other persons, and you educate them as to exactly what the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange does. And I think starting with schools, to educate children about the company is really a good idea, because you get it in them at that early stage, and this is an option that we have. Because with the older generation that we have now, a lot of them might not be open to having outsiders invest in their company.
No, and that's a problem that we have. The listing, yeah, it is.
It is.
There's so many private businesses that they don't want their as long as you list on your stock exchange, your financials are public information. So many private businesses, private families, they don't want their information out there, right? For all sorts of reasons, they come up with security,
Okay,
but it augurs well for both the financial sector as well as the economy. We've had little or no growth in terms of listings on the stock exchange. We are relatively illiquid. So it would really augur well for us
to be able to have more persons.
To have more persons listed, more options available to investors, and those kinds of things.
Okay. So that is a very viable option. That
I really hope that is something that comes to pass in 2012 at least.
Okay. So what about the other initiatives that the IMF mentioned that might lead to growth in our local economy?
Well, one of the things that contributed to the decline in economic activity in 2011 was the decline in energy output, which was really due to a lot of plants having to shut down for maintenance work and those kinds of things. And that was really a short-term situation. So they have factored in that in 2012, these plants will start back operating, output should increase, and energy prices are still high, oil prices are still high, natural gas prices are still relatively high. So, that's one of the things that they factored in.
Yeah, I believe that the last 2011-2012 budget was based on a projected price of $75.
Yeah, and I believe at the end of December, energy prices were, I think, averaging around $98. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say energy prices, I should be more specific. Oil prices was averaging around $98 a barrel.
So we should have, that goes into the
Heritage and Stabilization Fund, whatever it is above the projected amount in the budget goes into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund.
But I think from recent reports in the newspapers and everything that has been in the media with the energy sector locally, I believe 7 plants are still down.
Okay.
So, and we're in February of 2012, so that's something we need to keep in mind. Going forward, we have this growth projected.
That's right.
The economists have made provisions, all things being equal, that the plants will be up and running, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, we still have 10 months of the year.
So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yes, we will.
So, with the government having all these plans, and how much the economy grows really in 2012, as you say, goes back to implementation.
That's right, because as you know, in Trinidad and Tobago economy, the government is the largest spender.
Yes.
So it really depends, I think, on the implementation of these projects coming out from the government. Some of them are short term, some of them are medium term.
Some might be long term.
Yeah, some are long term. So
as an economist, would you want to venture and talk a little bit about how government could actually get some of these projects implemented to stimulate growth in 2012?
well, I mean, you touched on government bureaucracy, right? You touched on
Our culture, which works against us a lot of times.
That's right. And really and truly, to me, government has been really trying to cut down on the level of corruption that's taking place. They've really tried to step up in ministries, really try to step up their
procurement practices.
That's right. There's a procurement bill that
procurement bill, I think right now. There's
that's
also
right.
white paper for procurement that I think has to be discussed, and I don't know if it's out. It's supposed to be out for public.
It's supposed to be out. I think I saw the Minister of Planning on television last week or the week before asking for support for the procurement bill.
That is something that I find so
interesting that we can't get support, right?
We can't get support. The other thing about things in Trinidad is that everybody is an expert on everything. Everybody has an opinion on what could be done and what should be done. But when for example, the white paper on procurement, it's out for comments, it's out for review. It's been there for quite a while. They're asking for comments. Nobody will comment. You get very little comment. And yet when it's passed as it is, and you have problems down the line, people say, oh, X, Y, Z, whatever.
That's a cultural thing with Trinidadians. That's how we are. We are never satisfied individuals. But then again, individuals are never satisfied.
They're never satisfied.
No.
So, all in all, you would think that things look good, let's hope.
I think so. I think with the way things are going, with the fiscal measures that the government have put out, I think we should see some level of growth in 2012. Of course, that is given the continued gains in private sector credits and consumer spending and those kinds of things.
One of the things that also jumps out of this IMF report here is volatility in food prices. I know a big part of our of the public's purse goes in imports. We like to import. We love all things foreign. That's the Trinidadian.
You know what I've found, though, and this is from my personal experience, going to the markets, you would find that some produce, local produce, is on par with foreign produce. And I have tended to sometimes buy foreign produce because they tend to last longer. So I think with the current drive by the Ministry of Agriculture to increase production locally, we could see some reduction in food prices. I have really found food prices are sticky downwards, especially local grown foods. I've also noticed that the wholesalers would sell their produce relatively in a relatively affordable at a relatively affordable cost, but then it's the retailers that hike your prices up. That's a personal observation. I don't know if, as a free market economist, I don't really believe in government intervention in everything, but I think there's some room for government intervention with regards to regulating the prices, especially local produce.
I think you made an interesting point when you said that the produce, some of them are on par, but if you're saying that the foreign produce lasts longer, maybe it has to do with quality or chemicals, or one is more organic or something of that nature.
Something.
It's interesting because the foreign produce is coming, from outside, and it gets here and it's still of better quality and it lasts longer.
I have found that generally
speaking.
right? I don't know if it's because they use more chemicals, as you said, locally, or it's because they don't. Maybe some of the retail
conditions.
Yeah, and not.
Might be,
yeah.
Might be a little worse off. But the point I really wanted to get to with that is that it could be. We've always had a local, agricultural industry in Trinidad, more or less. But I think with the new Minister of Agriculture that we have, I've seen him, I've observed, it has been my observation too, that he's more involved in the ministry.
That's right, he's
very involved. And from foreign produce being of a better quality, if we want to, generalize, probably infer and say that, I would have hoped that with his involvement, and with all the incentives that government has also for farmers in this year's budget and going forward, I would hope that the industry would develop, and very soon we would be on par with what our, what is available from away.
I have noticed in the local supermarkets, they have the hydroponic produce.
Right.
Right, and I was very pleased with the quality. It was, a little bit more expensive, but that's understandable, right? So hopefully we see more of that. Have good quality stuff. Yeah.
So that is also an avenue for entrepreneurship in Trinidad. I have a few persons who have mentioned that this is something they would want to get get into.
That's really excellent because there's this perception that you move away as you get more educated. You move away from agriculture. I'm really glad that people are going towards it. It's a very lucrative industry. I think
it's very lucrative. I suppose it can be very relaxing also. You talk too much and your plants get upset at all this, jabba. But still, it's interesting to see people wanting to be involved in agriculture.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I would hope that the industry develops for a lot of reasons. People would be employed in it, and also for the fact that it would help decrease our import bill, and that would, spell well for our GDP.
That's right. Our balance of payments.
Yes, that is it. So there's so many things that the government has to offer from last year's budget. It's really, and I want to say also, it's not only the government who has to implement it. We must also take responsibility for seeing the economy progress.
That's right. That is very true.
As entrepreneurs, as workers, even if you're not gainfully, if you don't have a business as an employee, when you go to work, you should go to work and produce, be productive.
That's right. That's right. And there's so much incentives out there for
people
to start their own little businesses. They have all these training programs out there,
That is one of the other things that I want to talk about. With GIVE, I believe it's not dollar to dollar anymore. It's free
tertiary education
to any university. Is it in Trinidad and locally?
Yeah.
Any of them foreign universities?
No, I think UTT and UE.
Okay, but that's still a lot, because I think it's been my experience that once people are educated, their level of thinking is different, and they have a lot more confidence to do things generally for themselves. And it's a personal growth of mine that when I was going to university, I had to take a student loan, I had to pay back that, and now young people have free tertiary, education.
Well, I mean, going forward, we really need to.
Interested in that. So going forward, they should take advantage of the opportunities. Is anything, and would you know if there's a limit to how many programs you could do under GIVE?
I don't think there's a limit,
So you could do a degree in engineering, and you can move on to one in management studies, whatever, as long as you keep on.
Well, as long as it's in UE and UTT, yeah, and I believe there's also 50% gates in other institutions like SPCS, SAMS, and those kinds of
the other institutions.
And also they have made it quite affordable to progress from your first degree to your second degree.
Okay.
It's just 50% you pay. So, really and truly, the government.
So there's no excuse not to be studying now in terms of cost.
No, there's no excuse. The only cost that you probably incur is the cost of your textbooks, traveling, housing, and those kinds of
I think
things.
there are also some loans there's a help loan, I believe, for students who would have gotten gates that takes care of their tuition, and for students who are not able to meet immediately their rent requirements and other living expenses, there's a revolving loan similar to what I would have paid as a tuition loan back in those days. So they have made it easy for people to really, educate themselves.
And I really think that, young people especially should really take up the opportunity, because you cannot be certain that this type of luxury, I should say, it will be available, and how in the long term.
Right.
How sustainable is it?
You're not sure, because next year the government could review the program and say we just can't afford to do it anymore.
That's right. I remember the government has been running a deficit budget for the past 2 years. At some point in time, I would hope that they would revise this free education. Whilst I am very, very happy for it and very, very glad that those that cannot afford it can now do so, but it has been my experience that for those that can afford it, it is not valued.
Right.
So I really hope that is something
that people take
into
consideration.
That's right.
Really jump at the chance to take it right now. As we close up, I just want to chat a little bit. It's interesting that you brought up the fact that the government has been running a deficit budget for the last 2 years, and it's something that we would ultimately have to deal with.
Reverse, and I believe it was it is Minister Dukran's intention with this budget to try and reverse that in the medium term.
I was just about to ask you, I was reading a review of the economy for 2011 here, and I took out this page because it says it deals with some of the fiscal adjustments by Greece, Ireland, and Portugal to deal with the global economic crisis in their area. And I see that they had to make some very hard decisions in terms of getting their economy back on track. Well, I don't know how really to say back on track.
Greece is still struggling. Greece is really still having a hard time getting back their economy on track. We are nowhere near that level, I believe. But they have really had to make some really tough decisions. They've had to privatize some of their public sector companies. A lot of people have been on the breadline. A lot of people in government jobs, jobs that we take for granted here, generally public sector has, I'm in a safe job. A lot of these public servants in Greece have had to take a pay cut. Some of them have had to go home. So we are really fortunate.
As you say, some of the fiscal measures that were approved in Greece in 2010, reduction in public employment by 20%.
That's right.
By 2050.
That's 20%.
Right. How much would that be in terms of our local employment in the public sector if we had to just generalize numbers?
I'm not sure.
Quite a bit, I'm sure. Closure and consumption.
Could you imagine the strikes?
I can't imagine. I don't want to imagine the strikes. Last night I was thinking if we could just touch a little bit on the strikes, with the impending strike that the OWTU has threatened with. I was thinking that, a lot of people say that God is a Trinidadian and we always saved from natural disasters. And I thought to myself, if this strike happens, it will be a national disaster.
Why? Why did you say that?
Well, it's so close to Carnival. So we will be in a bad light, people, so many visitors. It's the busiest time of the year for this to happen. Um, we have threat of a strike and people are panicking, you can imagine,
And there's really no need to panic. The government, I think, not really the government, but I think NP has released statements saying that we have about 20 days of reserves.
Right.
There's really no need to panic buy, which a lot of people are doing, And 75% increase is quite a lot to be asking for and to be striking for, given where our economy is and what it is we have to do to get back on track.
No, the only reason I thought it was I was just thinking funny thoughts to myself that, it's a natural, I was just playing on the God is a Trinidadian and we save from natural disasters.
That's right, and you know how important Carnival is to us.
Carnival is too. But somebody wrote on one of the blogs I was reading online and they were saying, if this is what the LWTU wants to do, they are saying that we don't care about the vendor who wants to go to the market. If he doesn't have fuel, we can't get food. We don't care about the doubles man who has to make, he survives on a day-to-day basis. We don't care about the school children who has to go to school because it doesn't affect you and I and even our director personally because we can't get from point X to point Y. It means that ultimately all of us are affected in some way. And these are things that we should sit down and think, whatever the situation is, we must be able to sit down and say, this is our position, this is what we can afford, this is what we can allow for, and as I said earlier, we all have a responsibility to see the economy prosper.
That's right.
So let's keep our fingers crossed again for no strike action.
I hope not.
I hope not. I think our director has plans for Carnival, so we wouldn't want those to be affected very adversely. So, Kavena, we've had a very nice discussion.
Yes.
We've touched on a lot of different things. That's why I like economists. Everything is interrelated. It ties back, and economics, really ties back to
everything macro
of our lives. Every single thing. It comes back to our culture, how we think, leads to how we behave, how we work, how we party, how we do everything.
That's right.
So, all in all,
we're not only theorists.
Sorry?
We're not only theorists, as many would like to believe.
I think that was a little more mathematical than wanting an economist. So, any final comments from you as we just get ready to wrap up here?
Just that, 2012 should be a year of growth, a jumpstart in growth. Mm-hmm. We should see good things coming out of the economy this year. Mm-hmm. Let's hope that our predictions come through.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Kavena has said that the government has put everything in their budget. They've outlined, they've made allocations.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure they would have put the relevant policies in place. We expect that they would have some little glitches with implementation, but we hope that would not happen because we want to see growth in 2012. All things being equal.
All things being equal.
We will have growth in 2012. Kavena, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.